Hey traders, what's going on? This is Chris at VerrilloTrading. Hope you guys are having a great day today. Welcome to the video. In this video, I want to show you guys how to configure the trade window in Sierra chart, and more importantly, how to program the trade window with values and configurations that are not based upon fixed tick sizes that you might normally use. The reason for this is because sometimes a trader might decide they want to base their stop losses and targets on other values that they're deriving from other indicators. And that's pretty much what I will show you in this video, which is how to set your trade window configuration so that it is constantly setting itself to be based on certain subgraph values in the case that you do not use a fixed tick size for your stop loss. If you do use fixed tick sizes for stops and targets, then you will not need to use this method because you can simply program them and save them to trade window configurations like you normally would in Sierra chart. And then you can select between them, and you can also add those trade window configurations to your control bar and then select between them that way as well. We're going to show how to send parameters to your trade window that are not based on fixed ticks of the market. They're going to be based on other subgraphs, other studies, and they can even be based on studies that are coming from other charts. So that's all, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to support the channel, you can check out the links in the description, and let's get on with it. So you're going to need a couple of things for this tutorial, and the first thing is you need to have just a very basic understanding of how to compile a custom study in Sierra chart, and you can do that. If you do not know how to do that, you can watch Frozen Tundra's video, which is something called First Steps for Creating Your Custom Study in Sierra chart, and I'll just put it on the screen and you can check that one out. That's the basic video that you should all watch. Okay, so let's talk about it now. We're going to need a basic study, and you can apply this to any study, and I'm going to show you the method that I'm using to send the trade window configuration here. Okay, so this is basically the code that takes care of it right here, and this is the main function right here at the bottom, which is sc.setAttachedOrders. Once this function is called, it will send all of these parameters into your trade window. Given that the statement before it is true. In this case, I just created a simple if statement. And of course, there might be different ways to do this, but I think that this was the easiest way to organize the code, just to show in the video. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is just show you guys really quickly. Look at my trade window configuration here. Right here in the control bar, I have put the different trade window configurations. So I'll switch it to one contract by clicking on that button, and you can see that it's automatically updated itself here to have one stop and one target. And you can also see that these values are continually updating themselves because they're based upon a reference, another study subgraph that is basing on something else. So in the case where, like I said, if you do not use fixed targets, this is going to be advantageous for you. So I'll switch it back to 2, and you'll see now that it switches to 2 targets and 2 stops. Now I haven't configured what happens for 3 and 4. So what you'll see is that when I switch it to 3, if you look at the quantity here, the quantity for the second OCO group is 2. The quantity for the first OCO group is 1. But because I haven't configured the sc.setAttachedOrders function to be doing anything when our trade window quantity is set to 3, then you can see here that the values are no longer updating themselves because I haven't programmed it. What you will need to do is, if you do work with multiple order sizes, if you tend to switch around your size a lot, you will have to program each order size individually and specify the target and stop offsets for each one of your targets and each one of your stops. And we'll show how to do that in the next part of the video. The first thing I will do is show you guys how this is all working together. If you look at the top of our if statement here, the first thing is input_bracket enable.get boolean, which is basically, this is an input at the top of our study function. And when it is equaling 1, that is one of our statements that needs to be true here. The next condition that needs to be true is our trade window order quantity needs to be a quantity of 1. And that is right here. We're just taking an integer from this function, which spits out the integer of whatever your trade window order quantity is set to. So if you set it to 1, this function will spit out a 1. Okay, so now this input right here, we're actually using an advanced custom study button to turn on and off this input. And I'll show you how this works together now. So if you look at the top of my screen here, there's a custom study button with these letters A, U, B, K, T. If I turn off this button and I switch my order quantity, you'll see that the targets and stops do not update. That's because when this button is turned on, it enables the input that is in our study that is responsible for this if statement to return true and set the trade window configurations. Okay, so let's go to the top of our study function here, and we'll show how this all works together, and I will also full screen this. So this is a study, one of my studies, but you don't need any of this. All you need is a DLL name. And again, just watch the basic video if you don't know how to compile a study and create a custom study. So you just give it a name like this, and then you have to create an input. So the input here, in this case, this is the input underscore bracket enabled, and it is set to sc.input number 2, which is actually the third index. Okay. So now in the study defaults here, this is where you set defaults for subgraphs or for input arrays and all of that. And like I said, all of this you will not need in your study if all you're doing is using it to set the bracket orders. But you can actually put this pretty much in any study you have and it should work fine. So I'll scroll down the defaults until I find the input I created. These are just subgraphs that are part of this study. So right here, take a look at these input arrays. So the first thing we've done is we've specified a name for this input underscore bracket enabled dot name. We just gave it a name and we said that this is responsible for the automatic setting of our trade window. Then we added the input array, which is a Boolean, which is setting it to on or off, basically. So input underscore bracket enabled dot set yes, no, defaulted to 0, which means by default it will be off. Okay, so that's all you're going to need here in the study defaults. The next thing you will need in your study here is you're going to need to specify an advanced custom study button to turn on and off that input. And this right here is the exact code that you need to put in order to turn on and off that input. So in this case, I've specified one of the advanced custom study buttons, in this case, button number 10. There's 150 of them you can choose from. So the if statement is basically when you press this button, when this button is pressed, what happens is there's a constant integer and with the name button state. And basically it's either going to be a 1 or a 0. So this basically tells it that it's going to be an on-off button. And this next line here goes to the input. So make sure you type in the correct name of your input here, input underscore bracket enabled dot set yes, no, to the button state, which will either be 1 or 0. And then the final line of code here, sc.set custom study control bar button enable. This is a useful function if you work with ACS buttons, and it can be used to turn off buttons when certain things happen. It can be used to turn them on. In the last argument of this function, this is meant to be either a 0 or a 1. If you type a 0, it will turn off this ACS button, and if you type a 1, it will turn it on. In this case, it's getting the Boolean from the input array. So this is all you need for that ACS button to work. Okay, so for anybody that doesn't know, we're going to show how to add one of these custom study buttons to your control bar in Sierra Chart. This is an important step. So the first thing is you need a control bar here, and you find the control bars by going to Window, then Control Bars. Right now I've activated control bar number 4. There's 8 different control bars you can add and configure. Really, you only need one of them. Okay, so activate a control bar. Then once you have a control bar here, you can right-click anywhere on the control bar to customize the control bar or float it out of the window, basically, or attach it to any of the 4 corners of the window. Right now, it's attached to the top. So you go to Customize Control Bar in this case. You have to navigate on the left side column here and find Advanced Custom Study Buttons. You bring down this drop-down. So whichever button you selected in your code, you will have to add that button here. So in this case, I'm using ACS button number 10. That's the one I am using in my custom study function. I will select it, then I'll select properties. This is where you can change the name of the button and apply a button color. In this case, I'm using the short captions and I've applied a color to it. And you can see that's how it appears in the top of the screen right there. Once you're ready with that, you can press OK. And just to show here, I've enabled the short captions for those buttons. When you have this enabled, it uses this name rather than the normal caption right here. One last thing about the ACS buttons is that you can program keyboard shortcuts to activate and deactivate these buttons. That's going to be done here, Global Settings, and then Customize Keyboard Shortcuts. And then you're going to have to find custom study control bar button keyboard shortcuts. And then you find the button that you want to have a keyboard shortcut for, and you're going to have to assign a keyboard shortcut here. Before you assign it, it will actually tell you if that keyboard shortcut is currently being used by another function in the software, so that's pretty useful. And once you've assigned it, press OK, and then once you press your keyboard shortcut, you should see your button getting activated and deactivated. Okay. If you see something like when you turn on the button and then you move around the chart and then the button turns off, that could be a number of things. One thing that it could be is you have another ACS button from another custom study that's conflicting with that one, meaning that you've used the same custom study button in another study. So you would want to use a different button number. That's the first thing. Another scenario, which is much less likely, is that if your study uses pointer events, there's a scenario with that where your button can get turned off. But I don't think this would happen based on the use case for this particular button here. Okay, and just talking about pointer events, I'll give you guys a quick tip with that right now. If you use a study that uses this function called sc.receive pointer events, like this one right here, this function actually has the potential to lag your charts considerably. So just, be careful with this using this function right here, and I'll teach you kind of a way to get around that. What will happen when you have pointer events turned on for a study is that when you're selected to one of these tools like the chart values crosshair or the pointer or the hand tool, when you move your cursor around, you might notice a couple of lags in your chart or in the user interface of Sierra Chart. Obviously, if you don't want it to lag, what I would recommend is try setting it to this tool instead, the Adjust Regions tool, which is kind of the same as the pointer, but actually this tool does not pick up pointer events. So when you move your cursor around, it's not going to be using the pointer events if you have a study on your chart that requires the pointer events. Okay, so let's go ahead now and explain how to set the trade window configurations. So again, at the bottom of our code right here, the first thing we've done is we just use this function sc.tradeWindowOrderQuantity and grab the integer there, and we're going to use that in our if statement. The next thing we will do here is create the actual if statement for each one. So what I'll do here is for every trading quantity, so let's say you trade a quantity of 1, a quantity of 2, a quantity of 3, etc. And every trader will be different. You might even want to configure this for different symbols. But normally, let's be honest, like it's not like you guys are going from trading, market where you're trading 1 to a market where you're trading 100. Like honestly, if you're going to be trying to trade stocks and then options and then futures, you're going to have to absolutely configure different presets for each one of those markets. So in this example, I'm just showing you guys how to do it for a futures contract where you can trade, 1 to 5 contracts. And in the case where you're trading, 5 contracts, you can specify individually what each one of your targets and stops will be doing, and they can all have different management strategies associated with them. In this case, the offsets for the stops on my 2 examples here are exactly the same. Okay, and that's what I'll use for this. Okay, so let's show the code here. So here's the if statement. Next thing is, this is the order structure. So the first thing is you need to create a structure using this right here, s_sc new order, and just give it a name. In this case, it's just the letter O. So this really should be the name of your trade window configuration right here. So whatever this is going to be doing could be specified with the name of that variable right there. In this case, I just used the letter O. Okay, so the first thing is the OCO group 1 quantity. So it's just set to the integer of whatever your order quantity is. In this case, it will be 1 if your trade quantity window is set to 1. Okay, the next thing is we specify our stop and target offsets. Now, if you're using fixed ticks, you would simply just type O.stop1 offset is equal to whatever the amount of ticks is. So let's say 8 ticks, 8 times sc.tick size, capital S for size, and that's it. But again, if you're using tick sizes, fixed tick sizes, then you don't even need to be using this method to do this to begin with. Like I said, this is if you're grabbing subgraphs on your study, or if you have other subgraphs that you've grabbed from another chart and you're using those as a reference to set your offsets for stops and targets. That's the purpose of this. So in this case, the stop and target offsets are making reference to a subgraph that is part of this study right here. And the name of this subgraph is s_vol. Now, when you specify a subgraph, you also need to specify the size of the array for the subgraph. In this case, sc.arraySize -1 is simply referring to whatever the last value of that subgraph is printing out for the last bar on the chart, the most recent value. Okay, so in this case, our stop offset is simply set to whatever the value of our subgraph is, the last value of our subgraph, and it is continually updating itself to that value as long as this statement is returning true. The next thing is the target offset. You can see that we are making reference to the same subgraph again, except that we are doing some calculations here with that. So for the target 1 offset, we're doing the study value here, the last study value, plus the study value divided by 2.5. So we're kind of extending that value by a little bit for our target 1 offset, okay? So now let's go on and specify certain parameters for our attached stops and targets. So you can specify different types of targets. In this case, we're not specifying anything for our target. It's just a target. So it's going to be just a limit order. But for the stop order, we are specifying a kind of stop, which in this case, O.attached order stop 1 type is equal to this order type right here. SCT_order type _ triggered step trailing stop. And then with this order type, there's a few parameters that need to be specified. The first one is the triggered trail stop trigger price offset. And you can see that I'm also setting that to be based on this subgraph value, the last value, array size -1. I'm dividing that value by 2 to populate this field. The next field for this type of stop is this one, the trigger trail stop trail price offset. And in this case, we are using the subgraph value again to specify the trailing offset. Once the trailing has begun, this will be the value for how far away the stop loss will be trailing. And then the final parameter here is the amount that the order steps by, the trail stop step price amount. And again, we are making reference to this value and making a division of that value to use it for our step price amount. And then once everything is set here, we are using this function, sc.setAttached_orders, and in the brackets just include the name of your order structure, O, and that will set all of this into your trade window. So now what I'll do here is I'm actually going to just copy this code another time, and I'm going to create a case for when we have an order quantity of 3. It is important that if you are doing this, you will need to be specifying what happens for each order quantity. So what we'll do here is I've copied the code another time, and we're going to specify what happens if our trade window quantity is 3. So I'll change that to a 3. Then I will duplicate this line right here, and I will just specify that it is OCO group 3, and the quantity will be 1. And then I'll go ahead and duplicate the lines for the stops and the targets to be stop number 3 and target number 3. Now let's say, for example, target 3 offset, we wanted to specify a different offset. So what I'll actually do for this offset, I want to make target 3 a little bit further away. So I'll actually take the division out of there. Okay, stop 3 will be the same offset as the other 2. Another thing we need to do is specify the attached order stop parameters for stop number 3 that we've just introduced here. So what I'll do is I'll just simply copy these 3 lines of code. We don't have to copy the trail stop step price amount because that one applies anytime there's a stop order of this order type. Whoa, we got some lightning here. So I've copied these 3 lines, and all I'm going to do is change that to a 3. And if you wanted to potentially alter the management of the stop orders for this particular order type, of course, it would be done here in the offsets. So now what I'll do is I'll just bring over my the remote compiler here, and you access this by going to Analysis, Build Custom Studies DLL, and then you go ahead and find the DLL. In this case, it's already there. I'll just build that, wait for it to compile. Okay, it's compiled successfully. So now let's take a look at our trade window, and you can see in that since our trade window quantity is set to 3, we can see that we now have 3 targets and 3 stops. And of course, since you're using that function to set the attached orders, if you go ahead and click there, you will not be able to go in and adjust these parameters because they're constantly being updated. If you did need to do that, you simply need to turn off your advanced custom study button. In this case, now you can go ahead and adjust things manually, right? So that's why I like the advanced custom study button, because it allows that flexibility. When you turn it on, you can have it set your trade window configuration to that, whatever you wanted there. So in this case, 1 contract, 2 contracts, 3 contracts, and I will just show you how that works now. So we have 1 primary order with 3 targets, and all of the stops are here. There's actually 3 separate stops and 3 separate targets, and we have a lot of lightning. So there we go. We set it to 2. You'll see that we have an initial order of 2. We have 2 attached targets and 2 attached stops that appear at the same price. I'll cancel that for now. I'll set it to 3. Now we have 3 targets and 3 stop orders, and they're continually being updated to match values of the specified study subgraphs that I've shown in the video. And they will continue to update themselves as long as your input is enabled, which is being controlled with that advanced custom study button. So in my actual study here, it's this input right here, auto bracket setting, that will be turned on to the yes setting when that button is pressed. All right. And that's pretty much how you do it, guys. I hope that this video helped you, and hopefully it can allow you to create some creative trade window configurations and switch between them on the fly like that. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.